I think that one of the biggest problems I see with their development, hindering their progress, is that they listen to an audio every day or they watch a video every day and follow this. And, the meditative arts is called an internal art for a reason. It's meant to be something where we can go inside and listen to ourselves and make that deeper connection within ourselves. And if every time we meditate, we're listening to an audio or watching a video, it's kind of doing the opposite. Now, it's okay to learn the practice through an audio or a video, and that's sometimes what we have to do if there's no teachers in our area or somebody that can go and help guide us in what we're doing. But don't get caught up in using that as a crutch.
Jeff, talk to me about the biggest misconception that maybe the average person, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but the average person, the misconception that they would have about building their own personal meditative practice.
One of the things that I hear most common with new students coming to the practice is that they feel like maybe they've tried it before and they've had some trouble with quieting their mind. And they feel like because they can't quiet their mind that they can't do the practice. And that's one of the misconceptions with a meditative practice, in that it's not about quieting your mind and being in this nirvana state. Meditation is there to teach you how to deal with these distractions and come back to that center or that place of focus. And so, for example, say you were to sit for 20 minutes a day or an hour a day or whatever that is for you. And during that 20-minute session, you get distracted 100 times. There's nothing bad about that. Even the most advanced meditation practitioners get distracted. But every time you get distracted and you bring your awareness back to the breath, back to your posture, back to the movement practice, if you're doing a movement meditation, you're getting a repetition in bringing that distraction back to center, back to focus. And it's helping you build that muscle to have more power to get yourself outside of those places where we go down that negative distraction. And oftentimes when we have a distraction, it leads to another, to another, to another. And eventually, 10 minutes later, an hour later, we're frustrated. Learning how to recognize those distractions right from the beginning and bring ourselves back to that focus is what the art of meditation is all about. It's about building that mind power and that strength to be able to do that. And it's used in so many areas. When you develop that skill set, that's why so many athletes are drawn to the practice, performers, different people that have different high performing stakes that they need to come to. And so using the meditative arts for that is very valuable, but it's also important just for your own personal well-being. You think about how many times we get distracted and it disturbs our day and puts us in a bad state. Learning how to use the practice in this way will help us stay more on a positive track, if you will.
Yeah, I'm sure you hear it all the time, specifically with this being, an area of expertise and with working with as many individuals as you have. But it's that whole, I tried it and it didn't work for me, right? It's like that is a very common out for people in so many areas of their life. And I think what I'm hearing you say is a lot of people that begin down this path think that if they're not Buddha in the first, session where they're completely at peace and in a enlightened state, that the meditation isn't working. But what I'm hearing you say is like, we have a misunderstanding of what we're actually aiming at with meditation. Is that accurate? Or are most people not aiming, or they don't have the correct desired end state of what they're trying to do with meditation?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think that people have the misunderstanding of what it's about, but I also think that, and this is something that I struggle with as a teacher, in that you'll have somebody that comes in and they'll want to take on the practice, and they'll try it once and they'll say, that was hard. I can't get it, and everything that you do in life that is good for you, it takes effort and it takes time, and with the meditative practice, here at my academy, we have a physical location as well as my online programs. anytime somebody new comes into our physical location, I always tell them right from the beginning, you want to be able to do at least a 20-minute a day ritual practice and commit to that. And if you can do that, you can really see a lot of benefits from the practice, but it's not always going to be easy. And if you're not willing to get past those first couple stages, you're going to miss all of the benefits of the practice, and I've had thousands of students come through the academy. I've been running this academy for over 30 years. And, I would be willing to bet that 90 to 95% of the people that come in here and follow those instructions and they do 20 minutes a day and integrate some of these active practices, and if they can keep that up for a year, they'll do this practice for the rest of their life because they'll see so many benefits from the practice. But if you just do once a week and you come to it like a hobby, you're going to miss out on a lot of what it's trying to teach you. And any meditative practice, whether you're doing a sitting meditation, standing meditation, a movement practice through Tai Chi or Qigong or yoga or whatever it is, it's meant to be integrated into your life and to become a way of life, not to be a hobby that we do once in a while.
I love that so much, man. And it's, you hit the nail on the head, man. Anything worth doing in this life is going to come with challenge and adversity. And, I do a lot of coaching with men these days. And, a lot of times I have to ask them, like, think of the things that you've been most proud of accomplishing. Like, how much effort was put into that? I have a background in bodybuilding, on the competitive nature and coaching as well. But it's like the amount of effort and work that it took for me to get on the stage the first time. Like, I didn't understand what I was getting into, but when you begin to embody it and make it a part of your life, which you're talking about here, making it a lifestyle or part of your being, not just a hobby, it's like that's where the fruit really begins to come into to your life. I like to maybe define meditation, because I think that is even something that so many people possibly have a misunderstanding on. It's like, is meditation we're sitting in the middle of a room on a yoga mat and it's utter quiet, or you've talked about some of the physical arts of it. Like, how do you define just meditation?
So when I look at the meditative arts, I encompass things from sitting meditation, standing meditation, walking meditation, different movement practices, which could be Tai Chi, Qigong, Bagua, Xingyi, any form of a meditative practice through movement. And as you're building a practice with meditation, there's five different directions you can take a meditative practice. We have what we call our athletic or our combative style of meditation, the therapeutic side, the philosophical side, the medical side, and then more of the meditative or spiritual side of the practice. So some people, when they come in here, really like to incorporate a still practice, and that's great. But for others that maybe their mind is hard to settle down and they can't sit in one place for 20 minutes, then for those individuals, I recommend starting with a movement practice. And that could be a Qigong set or series of routines, different things that you're doing with the body to help integrate that with the breath to get us into more of that awareness or that meditative state. It could be a Tai Chi practice. There's a lot of different directions you can take that. So there's three different methods of incorporating a meditative practice. We have ritual, active, and philosophical practices. Ritual practices are when you set time aside every day. And in any type of a meditative practice, whether you're doing a sitting practice, standing meditation, a movement practice, you want to have that ritual time where you're setting a little bit of time aside, 20 minutes, a half an hour, whatever that is for you. And what I found through time is that this is the most valuable part of a meditation practice. Now, one of the things that I hear people say often is that they don't have enough time, they're too busy, they can't incorporate meditative practice into their life. Well, you know, I heard a quote once from the Dalai Lama that said, everybody should meditate for at least 20 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then you should meditate for an hour. And I love this quote in that it is so important that we reconnect with who we are and we spend that time once a day just trying to improve our awareness, be more in tune with how we feel, because it's so easy in today's distractions. We've got 1,000 things bombarding us from every angle, to get caught up in these things and kind of forget, really who we are if we're not too careful with this. And one of my longtime meditation teachers, he always talks about wearing a mask. And, we go through society all the time wearing a mask, not letting people know how we really feel or who we are, to protect ourselves. And sometimes we do this so much that when we look in the mirror, we're still wearing that mask. Meditation helps us to come back and really see ourselves for who we are and connect with our heart and our true nature, which is one of the things that makes it so valuable. Then we have active practices. Active practices are things that we can do when we're walking down the street or standing in line at the grocery store. And these can be done in 30 seconds, 2 minutes. They're ways to integrate the idea of meditation, our awareness, our breath work into everything we do throughout the day. And what I recommend for a lot of people when they're starting is to maybe set a reminder on their phone to go off every 60 minutes or every 90 minutes. And every time you hear that, maybe count out 10 breaths or do some spinal rotations or do a simple movement practice for a couple minutes to just bring our awareness back in. Then we also have philosophical practices, and those could be either ritual or active base.
I love all this, man. I doubt you're on TikTok, are you, Jeff?
I do have a TikTok. Yeah, yeah.
You do have TikTok. Okay. I don't know if you've seen this viral trend. I saw it was a Daily Wire reaction to this recent viral trend on TikTok. And it's called raw dogging. And what this is this is Generation Z. So this is the the youngest generation. I think we have, whatever it is, 16 to 20 something year olds. They're going viral because they're going on airplanes and they're sitting there on the airplane doing nothing. Now they're recording themselves doing nothing. So they are in fact doing something, but it's such an where have we gotten to, Jeff, that doing nothing has now become a viral trend. Right? Like this conversation we're having is so important in today's world because we live in a world of stimulation, of distraction, that the fact that people sit on an airplane and think that it's like something new to do nothing on an airplane. I mean, our parents, probably you even had points where you flew, and that is actually what you had to do because you didn't have a smartphone while you were there. So I think that this is just an important thing to have this periods throughout our days where we are just intentional about doing nothing. As you're talking about the active side of things, like I mentioned at the beginning, like I spent some time in bodybuilding, and I don't think people would understand when I say, for me, training these days is a meditative practice. It's a point where I can disconnect from the world. I can be centered in on what's happening inside my body, inside my heart, inside my mind. It's just me and the muscles moving. Now, there are points, yes, where it's super intense and I'm not super connected meditatively, but I would definitely describe some of the things that I do in the gym as an active meditative practice. One of the things you're talking about with each one of these, you talked about the 5 different ways here: the athletic, the therapeutic, the philosophical, the medical, and then the spiritual, and then the 3 ways to do that. One of the things I kept hearing you referring to was getting into a meditative state. I guess the question is, are there like physiological markers that we're looking for? Like, how does one know if they are in a meditative state?
Yes, so there are different levels of meditation, and that's going to come through time with your practice. There's different brainwave states that we get in through the practice. But one of the things that I think is real important for somebody new, rather than trying to think of what state their mind is just to go into thinking about first, in the meditative arts, we have what we call the 5 regulations: regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. If you start a practice, the first goal is learning how to regulate the body. Now, when you're doing a meditative practice, whether it is a still meditation or a movement meditation, we want to think about, what is our posture? Are we holding tension? Are we in good alignment? And so all of these things we can do all day, every day. You think about when you have somebody at a computer all day and they're hunched over like this with their shoulders rounded forward, and they do that for 3 or 4 hours, they're going to start feeling lethargic. They're going to feel maybe tight throughout the neck and the shoulders. All of these things are going to change our energetic state. And so, on the other side of that, if somebody was to walk into your room that was maybe your most respected, admired person on the planet, I don't know, maybe it's Michael Jordan, I don't know, whoever that is for you, think about how you would perk up and how your energetic state would just be, kind of almost in this amazement feeling that you would be having. Well, that's a simple act of learning how to keep our body in correct alignment and posture can influence that energy. And then we have regulating the breath. Now, regulating the body, you can learn how to do that pretty well in a fairly short amount of time, 2 or 3 months of consistent effort. Regulating the breath is a little more complex. Oftentimes they refer to Qigong as the science of the breath. And there's hundreds of different breathing strategies used for many different things. But with regulating the breath is the same idea. If you think about breathing really shallowly, your body is going to be starting to become depleted because it doesn't have that oxygen, carbon and oxide exchange. But if you're really filling the lungs and you're breathing and you're using the 100% of your lung capacity, you can pick up your energy through the breath. I read an article one time that talked about how the average person uses between 40 and 60% of their lung capacity. This one idea of learning how to improve our breath and come back to that deep belly breathing and using more of our lung capacity can bring a lot more energy into our life. And Harvard Medical School did a study once, and they took these people who were suffering from dementia and early Alzheimer's disease, and they put them into oxygen chambers, and they had them breathe deeply for a fairly short amount of time. And then they tested them after they put them into these chambers. And what they found is that almost every person that they ran through this, their memory and their improvement when they tested them after these deep breathing exercises improved by 25 to 30% from just a few sessions. And so, as we go through life, we're losing our cells are dying off every day, and they're being replenished and new cells are being built. But if our oxygen intake is depleted and we're only breathing in with 40% of our lung capacity, that means these cells that are being regenerated are at a lack of oxygen, and they're weaker than they could have been if we were taking in more oxygen and more air and having more power from that exchange. And so I think that a lot of this is connected. And if we in the average person too, you think about as we age, you look at somebody who's 50, 60, 70, 80, the older we get, the more shallow we breathe. And so if we can train ourselves to keep that breath and have that full belly breathing and to really regulate that, that can be very beneficial as we age. And then also any activity we do as we're younger and healthy and in athletics, it can help us perform better as well. And so there's a lot of connections with, now we're into the breath regulation. The next thing we talk about is regulating the mind. And regulating the mind, again, this is another very powerful thing that takes years and years to develop, but it's something that you can benefit from day one. So you think about if you let your mind get distracted and you think about a problem in your life, and that problem leads to the next, to the next, to the next, eventually you're depressed. Learning how to recognize those distractions and come back to center, which is one of the things that meditation helps us do, this can help us live a lot more positively. And same thing when we come back to thinking about those cells that are being rebuilt every day. If we're in a negative, low energetic state with our mind, those cells aren't going to be as healthy and being regenerated with as much positive energy as they could have been. And so the next thing we talk about in that series of regulations is regulating the energy. Now, if you can get to the point where you're regulating the body, regulating the breath, and regulating the mind, regulating the energy is easy. It's having those foundational principles of the previous three is what gives us the power to regulate the energy. And then lastly is regulating the spirit. And this is more of kind of like a higher level in the practice, and what all meditation practitioners, qigong practitioners are looking to eventually get to. But this is kind of the basic idea of how we can regulate different states in our awareness through meditation.
I love all the benefits that you're talking about. I think that at least in as many people as I talking to it, and the few conversations I've had with people, we encourage and we prescribe certain meditative practices through our recovery programs. Everybody thinks it's about learning just to be calm and still, right? Like, I need to meditate so I can just be calm and at peace. But it's like you're talking about the increasing in your overall energy, right? This kind of power stance that maybe Tony Robbins has kind of talked about in some of his Awaken the Giant Within. It's like, if you can just stand up, shoulders back. Jordan Peterson talked about this in 12 Rules for Life, chapter 1. Like, the lobsters do this, like when they're interacting with other lobsters, it's like so ingrained in our nature. And then you're talking about the breath here. This is all great stuff. You mentioned a couple reasons as to why people wouldn't start a meditative practice, time being one of them, right? I don't have the time to do this, or they've tried it and it doesn't work. What are some of the other reasons why people believe that they can't succeed at getting into a meditative state?
I think the biggest one is just lack of discipline. A lot of times we get caught up into our day-to-day routines and kind of almost get in a rut in life. You go to work, you come home, you flip on the TV, you sit on the couch, and then the day's over and you repeat, and you're getting in this kind of hamster wheel effect that you're doing the same things every day. Well, you know, the beautiful thing about practicing meditation and integrating these philosophies into your life is that you don't have to be a monk and retire and go live in a cave and meditate all day every day to experience the benefits of this practice. If you just integrate some of these simple practices into your day-to-day routine, I guarantee you, if you make that commitment and have the discipline to do that, and you do it daily for a year, you'll do it for the rest of your life. Now, that being said, getting somebody and showing them to be disciplined enough to do it every day for a year and to see those benefits is probably the biggest hurdle for me being a teacher, because I want everybody that comes in here to this practice, I want them to see the benefits, and whether they continue on with me or not, I want them to integrate these practices into their lives so they can experience the benefit of the practice and live a happier, healthy life. It's very difficult for some people. I think about my mom, for example. I've been trying to get her to walk every day just to keep her healthy for years, and building that habit is just difficult for some people. And I think that that's probably the biggest hurdle, is getting people to understand that discipline as to why this is helpful. And so as somebody new coming to the practice, one of the things that I have them think about is, why did they come here? Why did they walk in my door? Why did they reach out to me via the internet? Because if you can stack these whys and think about all of the things that you want to get by incorporating this practice, maybe you want to be less stressed, you want to be more mobile, you want to feel healthier in your body, you want to be more present with your partner, you want to be more um, effective in the athletics that you're doing, whatever it is. If you have a list of whys that's a mile long, now when you get up in the morning, your alarm goes off and you feel like you want to stay in bed, you have reasons to get out of bed and go do your practice. And so I think that that's a helpful thing to think about for people that are thinking about integrating this practice, because if they don't really have a reason to do it, it's probably not going to stick.
Yeah. In the marketing world, they talk a lot about like the three big buckets, right? These are going to be the things that are going to move people to make buying decisions, and it's health, wealth, and love, right? So, if you look at probably the biggest brands in the world and you were to analyze their marketing, their messaging is going to be centered around one of those three areas. It's going to improve your health. So your physical fitness, oftentimes in marketing, that's going to be more the appearance. It's just the world that we live in, right? Everybody's concerned with the way that they look. Or it's going to help you make more money, or it's going to help you fall in love or find love, right? So health, wealth, and love. I've studied a lot of marketing. I've worked behind the scenes and launching some very successful brands, been involved in seven-figure launches multiple times over and over and over again. And if we can drive those message homes to marketers or product creators, you have a higher likelihood of success, right? So health, wealth, and love. I guess maybe sometimes when it comes to meditation is it's not marketed correctly, right? And this is just me speaking from an outsider, right? I'm not in the meditative world, but I don't hear a lot of conversation around. We talked about the breathing, we talked about the energy side here, things, but from the physical health side of things, or how can meditation help you increase your financial earning capacity? How can it help you produce wealth in your life? Or how can even having a meditative practice improve your relationships? Can you speak to any of those? Just in terms of like, I'm not asking you to sell meditation, right? Like, hopefully everybody's going to already get that, but sometimes the messaging matters, right, Jeff? So, yeah, speak to meditation, carry over your health, wealth, or your relationships.
Yes. So the first thing that came to mind when you were talking about that was the idea of yielding. And now there's many different bit of benefits in incorporating a meditative practice. But in my recent book, The Yielding Warrior, I break down yielding into three categories. We have physical yielding, mental yielding, and emotional yielding. Now, physical yielding is, and I'm going to answer your question in a bit of a roundabout way, so bear with me for a second here. So, physical yielding is the easiest one to understand. It's the idea of, say, I push you and you push me. Whoever's the bigger, stronger person with the most leverage is going to eventually push the other person over. But with yielding, instead of us seeing who the bigger meathead is, when you push me, I get out of the way of that force. And so now I can respond with less effort. So I'm not trying to see if I'm bigger and stronger than you. And it's obvious how this is very helpful in uh, a physical confrontation, right? I can't always request that somebody who wants to kick my ass is going to be smaller than me so I can overpower them. So learning how to use yielding in martial arts has been used for generations. Now, in order to be good at physical yielding, a lot of things have to come into play. We need to be well rooted. The lower part of our body needs to be strong and flexible so you can change your central equilibrium without getting tight. The body has to be relaxed, the breath has to be calm, and the mind has to be present. Now, in order to get to a high level of this is years and years of training. But the great thing about this is from day one, in improving our awareness with these tools, we can benefit a lot from this. Once we start to see those things more inside of ourselves, now we can also see them more in other people. And then this is where I kind of veer off into what we call mental yielding. Say, for example, I say something that unsettles you, and I pick up on it right from the beginning. It's a lot easier to adjust the conversation and keep us in a happy place than if I'm not paying attention to that. And pretty soon I'm so far off track, you want to slap me upside the head. Learning how to use yielding in all of your relationships is extremely powerful. One, you're just being more considerate, but two, now you're easier to be around. People enjoy your energy, and you can use this for positive influence, whether you're in sales, in your negotiations, in your relationships, in anything you do, because when you can have that hypersensitivity and awareness to what you're doing, it's a lot easier to lead something to a positive outcome without that resistance. And that can be extremely helpful in any kind of love relationship or business relationship. Then we talk about moving into what I call emotional yielding. And emotional yielding is very much like mental yielding, but it's with your own interpersonal conflicts. So you think about oftentimes something will happen to us and we'll respond and we'll go down this path and we might get an hour, a day, a week down that road and realize maybe that wasn't the best choice. With yielding, however, if we could have noticed that right from the beginning, a lot of times it can save us a lot of heartache on the other side because we can see it from a different perspective and maybe pick a different decision on how we want to respond to it. Now, I've been explaining yielding for years, and one of the most common things I hear people say when I start talking about this is that, that makes a lot of sense. I do that all the time. And I agree. I think everybody does yielding to some degree all the time. But it's kind of like if you or I were to walk into a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years, I guarantee you he would see things that you and I, or at least myself, would have no clue of. The timeline, the series of events, all of these things that he's studied his whole life and figured out. Well, the meditative arts, I feel, help you see things that most people will go through life never seeing. It's kind of like if you have a coach who has a group of athletes and they're very disciplined, they're on their game, it's pretty easy to get these athletes to 85% of their potential. But get them to 90%, 95%, 97%, now you're talking about, like the Kobe Bryants, the Michael Jordans, these guys that are almost look magical when they play. I feel like with this kind of awareness and sense of being in tune with what's going on around you, that you could never get to the 95, 97% without a meditative practice.
How old are you, Jeff?
53.
Okay. And you've had your practice for 35 years. So that means you started teaching meditation when you were 17, 18?
No, no, I've been doing martial arts for 36 years. I've been running my academy for 30 years.
Okay, 30 years. And that's a martial arts academy.
Yes, sir. And we have also our meditative program. So we have 4 different programs here at the Academy. We have our meditation program, which is Tai Chi, Qigong, sitting meditation, standing meditation. We do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, Muay Thai, and Western boxing. So we have a few different things going on here.
Yeah. Can you share how you came into the meditative arts? Like, was there an awakening in your life? Was there a traumatic event experience? Were your parents meditators, and this was just a home that you were kind of raised up in? Like, what was kind of the backstory of how you even found this world?
So when I was a young guy, I was into Western boxing, and that was kind of my main thing. I used to go to the gym 5, 6 days a week, and I just loved the challenge, the thrill, the strategy behind it. And I used to go to this boxing gym that was just a few blocks here from my academy. It's called Grand Avenue Boxing Gym. And this was back in the late 80s, early 90s. And in a boxing gym, I'm not sure if you've ever been to one before, but it's run a lot different than a classroom environment. So, if you go to a martial arts academy, oftentimes you'll have the instructor working with 20, 30 different people. In a boxing gym, there's usually, I don't know, a handful of coaches there, and each one of those coaches might have 3 or 5 fighters that they're working with. Well, at the gym that I was at, there was one coach there who was a very well-known coach. He had created national and world champion level fighters, and I really wanted him to get to notice me. I wanted to spend time with him and get to train with him. And so I'd always show up at the gym when I knew he was going to be there and work real hard and kind of let him know that I was interested in working with him. After following him around for 3 or 4 months, he finally started giving me some tips and showing me some things and spending a little bit of time with me. It was maybe only 2 or 3 weeks of working with him, and he told me, if you really want to be good at boxing, you should start doing meditation and Tai Chi. Now, here I am, this young guy who's looking at Tai Chi like, isn't that for like old people in the park? How's that going to help me be a better fighter? However, I had a lot of respect for him, and I started taking on the practice. He told me from the beginning that I should do about an hour a day. And everything he gave me, I treated like it was gold. I did it every day. I was very disciplined. So I was doing an hour and a half of my meditation practice every day. And I was doing it like I brushed my teeth. I never missed a day. Last thing I wanted to do was to go to the gym and to have him ask me if I practiced today and have to tell him no. So I was on it and I was doing it all the time. Well, in that first couple weeks of practice, he showed me the first few movements of a Tai Chi form. And then he just kind of left it at that. And I was doing an hour and a half every day of 3 movements that I could show you in a half an hour. 2 or 3 months rolled by, and I started getting a little bit frustrated, thinking, man, is this guy ever going to show me anything? What am I doing this for? I couldn't figure it out. About 6 or 7 months roll by. I'm still doing my practice every day. I go down in my basement one morning to do my meditation practice, and I look up at the clock and an hour and a half had already gone by and it felt like 15 minutes. And I had this strange realization, like, what was that? What just happened? How was that so different? And from that day, I'll never forget it. I was addicted. I was like wanting to experience that feeling again. And I was doing it all the time. And I'm sure he noticed that change in my energetic state or my mental state, because shortly after I had that realization, he showed me the rest of the form in a couple weeks, which it takes most people, 6 to 12 months to learn the form. But it was only because I'd put all of that time into learning those foundational principles, which is the hardest thing to teach people. And so he was waiting for me to make that realization before he showed me the rest. And from that point on, it changed my focus in my life in so many ways. I'll do meditation until I can't, and so it's just become part of my life.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story, man. And I would assume that having that influence early on through a mentorship and having a guide like that in your life has probably inspired you to be the coach that you are today to a certain degree, right? It's like, how do I give back everything that was given to me? It's like I can teach the lessons and the wisdom and the insights. It sounds like he Miyagi'd you a little bit, right? He gave you like a small taste of it without you really understanding like what was actually being taught. I love talk. I have a presentation I give sometimes where I kind of describe the work that I do, and it's like the early influences that we had in our life. Like I watched Karate Kid on repeat from the ages of 4 to probably 8 every single day. And it's like sometimes it's like when I'm coaching men to help them overcome pornography addiction, it's like clean your room, clean your room, clean your room. You don't understand, like it's an act of self-respect and discipline to clean your room up. You begin to see yourself a whole lot differently. So it's like that, how do we do something without them truly understanding like what's being embedded in the lessons? I love all that. So we've talked about the methods of it, the approaches, the body, breath, mind, energy, spirit, why people don't do it, discipline, lack of time, it doesn't work. If we could maybe in the next couple of minutes here, like obviously direct people to you, your book, your work. How does one get started, right? Like, do you need 20 minutes? Is 5 sufficient? Do you start with guided meditation? Do you start with the walking? Like, so, imagine I'm, just loving everything that we're saying here. And I'm like, Jeff, you sold me. I've got the wealth, health, love, all that kind of stuff, bought into it. I'm ready to go. What's my first step that I take here after leaving today's conversation?
Great question. There's a few things there I'd like to touch on. One is, if you're interested in kind of following my methodology and kind of what I've put together, you could go to theyieldingwarrior.com/book and get a free copy of my book. Just pay for shipping and handling. Also at theyieldingwarrior.com, you can get access to my membership training program as well as my teacher training programs. If you have a yoga studio or a martial arts studio and you're interested in incorporating a meditative practice as another pillar in your program. As far as using audios or videos to learn from, I think it's a great source to learn from. But one of the biggest things that I've seen through talking to people, because meditation is pretty popular these days. And so I meet people all the time that tell me they meditate. And I think that one of the biggest problems I see with their development and that's hindering, hindering their progress is that they listen to an audio every day or they watch a video every day and follow this. And, the meditative arts is called an internal art for a reason. It's meant to be something where we can go inside and listen to ourselves and make that deeper connection within ourselves. And if every time we meditate, we're listening to an audio or watching a video, it's kind of doing the opposite. Now, it's okay to learn the practice through an audio or a video, and that's sometimes what we have to do if there's no teachers in our area or somebody that can go and help guide us in what we're doing. But don't get caught up in using that as a crutch, because if you're listening to that every day and that's your meditation practice, you're really not getting what it was intended for.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's why I asked the question, because I'm subscribed to some apps. I have a Brain FM thing, and it helps with there's different what's the word I'm looking for here? Something with the brain states that it puts you in. But you can have them for like work time. So if you're trying to do deep work, like you throw the headphones on, it's got certain um cadences of frequencies and the tones, and then they got some deep sleep, they got restful sleep, kind of if you want to take a nap, but there is a guided meditation in there. I've used it in the past. Like I said, I think for me it's been the active side of meditation has probably been the biggest thing that I've accomplished or succeeded, right? Where I talked about the training side. Walks, daily walks, and peace and quiet have been really profound. I've dabbled in and out of like the sitting and rest, and I probably know that is something I could definitely benefit from. So, if somebody is looking to get started without the use of that, they're looking to do the peace and quiet. What's the minimal effective dose, right? So, if we mentioned daily, just 3 days a week getting started. If you get 5 minutes in, is that enough? Like if we're talking bare minimum effective dose to get somebody right, because it's doing enough that you're going to be consistent with it, I'm assuming, right? And that's going to build the confidence that I can't do this, and you can progress it over time. So if I'm looking to just started in the mindfulness, meditative, sit and quiet, knowing that I'm not silencing the thoughts, but I'm controlling them, what we talked about at the beginning, minimum effective dose for somebody.
I usually tell my students when they come in here to try to integrate a ritual practice and active practices as a foundation. My recommendation is to do 20 minutes a day of a ritual practice. However, if you're somebody who that seems difficult for you, if you were to just start with 5 minutes a day and do that consistently and make it part of your, to where it becomes easy, like you're brushing your teeth, you don't even have to think about it, then bump it up to 10 minutes. And, you could integrate and kind of move the practices in that way. The active practices, do 5 or 6 of those a day. And remember, these are great because they can be in unison to something else. You could be walking down the street and practicing your breath work. You could be doing spinal rotations while you're sitting at your desk at your computer. It doesn't have to be something where it's taking you away from your daily to-dos. It's just a way that kind of brings that awareness and that energy back into yourself throughout the day and starting to make it more of a way of life and less of a hobby. And once we start to integrate the practices that way in everything we do, that's where you really see the true benefits of the practice.
Yeah, yeah, and the reason why I teed the question up in the way that I did, and I appreciate you. I know as a true practitioner, it's hard to kind of answer some of those specific dosage questions, right? Because it's like it does need to be done daily. But understanding behavioral change, understanding how people build and sustain habits over the long term. Like if you can get somebody down to do one push up, chances of them doing more over time is a much higher probability. But if you say I need to do 50 push-ups a day, they're going to be scared to start. But you say all you're looking to do is one, well, you're already down there, you're going to do one. Or in the book Atomic Habits, James Clear talks about a patient that he was working with that had like 200 pounds he needed to lose, and for 6 months he told him, all I want you to do is drive to the gym, walk in, walk out. For 6 months he wasn't allowed to touch a piece of equipment. He literally drove to the gym, walked in, walked out. But he built the habit and the commitment and the discipline of showing up, right? So if we get people to show up for meditation, whether it's 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, the chances of them sticking with it, because now the barrier to entry is so much less, they'll be able to sustain that over the long term, and it will become a part of their lifestyle, right? So I appreciate the way you kind of answer that question there. Everybody should meditate, right? I'm assuming there's not a person out there that couldn't benefit from having this in their life. But, if we got some parents out there that are maybe looking to take this as a family practice, like, is this something that kids can benefit from? And at what age would you begin to expose them to something? Because I'm sure there's got to be massive benefit, especially in today's chaotic world with all the attention seeking things. So yeah, where does it kind of come into a child's life?
Definitely kids can get integrated into a meditative practice. What I've found through teaching martial arts for so many years is that kids like things that are a little bit faster paced. So a lot of times with the younger kids, what I try to do is integrate some of the meditation philosophies and some of the basic core fundamental practices into some of the movement practices to make it more fun for them. As far as like parents or the average practitioner, something that I didn't mention earlier that I think is really valuable and something that you want to think about when integrating meditation into your life is that meditation is meant to be an evolving practice, and it shouldn't be the same today as it will a year from now, 5 years, 10 years. And, I've been studying the meditative arts for over 30 years, and I'm still just a student learning all the time. I'm very far from being the master. And, it is an extremely deep practice. And if you want to get the most out of it, and you start to see the science behind it and really look into the depth of the practice, that's one of the things that I think can inspire you and keep it fun for you, because it's not just sitting still and counting your breaths. There's so much more to it than that. And the cool thing about this is once you start learning the science behind the practice, you can build a practice around your lifestyle and incorporate different meditation practices that will help you accomplish whatever goals you want to do by coming to the practice. And the reasons why you're coming to the practice could be a lot different than mine. And so we would do different breathing strategies, different meditation practices, and integrate those in a very different way.
Time of day, does that matter? There's been debates in the fitness community that, training in the morning versus training in the evening, higher levels of testosterone. I think the more recent research comes out that it doesn't really matter. It's more about the consistency. Other things I think have benefits earlier on in the day, different type of practices that people integrate, biohacks, I guess you could call them. You don't want to do, a 40-degree cold plunge right before you're trying to go to bed. You might have some difficulty winding down, but it would be a great time to do a sauna. You might want to do a cold plunge in the morning, do a sauna in the evening. So in terms of structuring, you mentioned you fit it into your lifestyle, but are there benefits to doing meditation in the morning versus in the evening versus in the afternoon? Like what are your thoughts, or what does, I guess, maybe the research kind of tell us around that?
So there definitely is. And there's a lot of things, we could talk for a whole hour on this. And so I'll try to keep it a little bit short. I think the most important thing is just get in the habit of doing it every day. And that outweighs when you're doing it. However, doing deeper practices within the meditative arts, you could go more to the yin side or the yang side, and these are very much influenced by where you are during the day. So if you wanted to get to a really deep level um, a, of more of a yin state in meditation, every day, for example, right before the sun comes up, there's an exchange of ions in the air. And within the energy, we talk about our body energy, we're connected to the universal energy. And you think about even just if you're ever in a lightning storm and just feel how that energy feels around you, or there's ways that the earth, or you go somewhere out in nature and you just feel this settled feeling. Our bodies are in tune to the earth nature and the universal nature. So when we want to integrate some of these kind of deeper levels of meditation that involved a higher sensitivity, we can use the time of day, we can use the location that we're in to get a little bit more of these different energetic states. Now, that's kind of a simple answer to that. When you start getting into the science behind it, there's a lot more involved with that. But for the average practitioner and for the new person getting into a meditative practice, I think the morning is probably the best time, just because your day is not going to get ahead of you. You're not going to look back before you go to bed and say, "Hey, I forgot to do this." For me, every morning I get out of bed, I brush my teeth, I go make a cup of tea, and I do my meditation practice. And I do that every day, hands down. That I haven't missed a day since I had my hip surgery. It's like just part of who I am. Now, if you do that and you have a little extra time in the afternoon or the evening to do a little bit more, great. But at least you have that out of the way and it just becomes part of your ritual.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. I love, stacking wins in the morning, prioritizing things, getting ahead of the day. There's so many physiological, neurological, confidence building. Like we could go on and on and on about the importance of routines, right? I guess, is there a point, because you mentioned maybe if you did it in the morning and then you found some time later on in the day, you can kind of add another session in. Like, can you overdose yourself with meditation? Like, what does an over meditated person look like? Are they just in a constant state of bliss?
I I've never seen anybody do too much meditation. Now, you there are practices that I would steer clear from for a beginning practitioner because there's some things that you need to build up to. But if you're just doing some basic breath work, some standing meditation or a movement meditation practice, you could do as much as you like.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeff, this has been fantastic, man. You know, exactly what I think I wanted to cover with you here today. So I appreciate your knowledge and your wisdom and your insights over 30 plus years in this field, man. You mentioned the book, you mentioned some of the other things that you have going on. We'll wrap it up here with our final question in a minute. But where can the guys in the audience, maybe connect with you? Or you mentioned you're on TikTok. Are you hanging out socially, like producing content anywhere? We want to point everybody to find your stuff. So where's the best place for guys outside of the book to maybe connect and learn deeper about the things you're doing?
So theyieldingwarrior.com, the website, is a great way to connect with me. All the social channels you can look up through the Yielding Warrior, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all of those are there. So um, it's pretty easy to find me.
Yeah, yeah, incredible. And guys, we'll have all that plugged down there in the show notes. We'll have a link to the book there as well. Pick it up with just covering the shipping costs. That's incredible. Making it affordable and easily accessible for everybody. So last question here, Jeff. The title of our show is called The Superhuman Life. We love to always end with the same and final question. In your opinion, what does living a superhuman life mean to you?
Being aware, being considerate, and making meaningful relationships.
Incredible. Guys, connect with the Yielding Warrior, Jeff Patterson. Get in a meditative practice. Start with 3, 5, 7, 10 minutes a day, and you will see an increase of abundance in your health, wealth, and relationships. And hopefully we sold you guys on that. I wasn't here to sell you, but we're here to provide you with the knowledge and insights. So Jeff, it's been a real honor, man. I appreciate you, brother. Have a great day, and we will see you guys on the other side.